Welcome back, fellow armchair generals. This is Gamer1745 here with my continuing playthrough of, yes, you got it, Hearts of Iron 3 with Black Ice 9.11. And as I'm making this, we're looking forward to the next Black Ice, whatever version it's going to be called. I'm not sure. I have heard 9.2. I think I also heard 10. Don't know whether they're figuring that, but this series will be hanging around. And like I said before, until I get a logical conclusion to it. Or, bug we can't pass, it's still in my mind because just a couple days ago we had that big problem that I'm sure you're aware of. Okay, carrier aircraft prototype has advanced. Good. And it's grayed out. Good. Okay. And interception tactics. Again, and I know I've said this before, but for those new here, I tend to like to use interception more than air superiority. It's not that interception is necessarily better in any way, shape, or form, except in one area that I know is better, uses less fuel, meaning the aircraft are on the ground, they are waiting to get an incoming aircraft spotted, and then they launch after it. So it's sort of a fuel savings setup for me. Okay, we're gonna have really good CAG, so carrier air groups. So we're gonna keep training those up. That's something I'm not used to doing as Germany. We can come over here. So far, once we got France taken down, there really hasn't been much action to watch. Yes, we do have North Africa, but they're at war with Norway and they're at war with Finland. That'll be an interesting thing to see if we get an invasion or some such thing. Okay, CAS pilot training, close air support. These, if you don't understand, you can continue to do both, but I don't know the point necessarily of doing both. But it's how much, when they go into combat, when your air interceptors, or as they're called here, your fighter types aircraft, do they target fighters more or do they target bombers more? It's not that if there's a big stack of bombers coming in, they'll ignore it. It's nothing like that. It's sort of my understanding is that, in the swirling fights, do they focus more on taking out the fighters or do they focus more on taking out the bombers if there's two types in the stack? So sort of pick your tactics, and so if you shoot down all the enemy fighters and then they're just sitting in bombers, obviously they're easier to shoot down. But if you want to ignore their fighters and just go after the bombers more so, you can do it. I don't know the best answer, but that's sort of what that does. Allows you to figure out what you want to do. Yeah, we'll do reconnaissance aircraft. Now, I am hoping that this episode we will be able to ask to join the Axis. I have been asked earlier by events, but they're waiting for sometime after the 1st of the month, I think. Okay, and then we'll be able to really see units and things move in the Mediterranean. That was combo machine gun cannons combo. Well, I think, yeah, damage control. We'll do that. So hopefully that'll be very soon. Now we're gonna join the Axis, but we're going to stay out of the war until much later. I'm saying it, I'm wondering why, but then I'm also wondering why go to war. Earlier, why wait? Why go to war? Anti-air upgrade, good. Okay, it was that one. But then it would come down to is why go to war at all? But no, I want to fight the Pacific War, and I sort of want to fight it as the Pacific War, and not just as something completely different. Yeah, we'll do improve reliability. Okay, the Historical Division Headquarters, sure thing, we'll take that. So we'll be waiting till... And also, to some point, the event... Oh, we gotta make decisions as to what more to build, what recently has come up. Okay, more carrier groups, and I also think more radar stations have been built. Okay, so we got level 2 radar there. We've got level 2 radar over Tokyo. Just in case they're going to start coming in. We can do better interceptions. Level 2 out of Iwo Jima. Trying to cover the approaches. Level 2 already there in Saipan. No, I was looking for truck. This is truck, I think. Yeah, okay. Level 2 and truck, sort of our central main port, as you can see. Oh, yeah, level 1. That's... Also looking to try to look out to sea and make good interceptions. Marcus Island. Why doesn't this have better radar? Because I just somehow forgot to do that. That would give better coverage out there. Trying to look into the Soviet Union here a little better. Which, of course, there probably, as we know, the AI is probably going to put most of its forces that it's going to have, and most of this border is unpassable, but is going to put it along the border, and this is, again, how sucky the AI is. It's like, yeah, we got to defend that border with Japan. Why? Now, I do believe there, well, I think there was an event to, if we go to war, to immediately give infrastructure here, because this is, it really wasn't impassable. This is just to make it so that Manchukuo, if you have Manchukuo, have a chance at defending itself from the Soviets. That's all that this is. Because obviously they can come in and around through here. So Beijing sort of defending there, and just have a few channeling points. But like I say, we sort of know that the Soviets are going to mostly park stuff on the border, but I still like to have a look deeper into the Soviet Union to give a better judge on if we're going to go to war or not, or what. Oh, anti-air, yeah. Do want to do those, but I'm trying to make sure. Other structural preparedness capabilities. Yeah, I think that's good. We are deciding not to do too much of the infrastructure, you know, railroads and highways and things like that to keep supply out in far-reaching places, but some of that stuff. Oh, okay, here we go. Germany forces conquer the Netherlands. That's now, I guess, gone to the British. Okay, as expected. I didn't know if it was going to take a while or not. Okay, yes, we're going to join the Axis. The Tripartite Pact was signed in Berlin, September 1940. Obviously, this is earlier. When does the Axis form? Well, obviously, sort of at different times. Wow. For different countries, because Axis is circling around Germany and Italy, but when does Japan join? Before Italy, because it gets in the Comintern Pact earlier. No, or the anti-Comintern Pact, I should say anti. Or does it, you know, should it be when they sign the Tripartite Pact in September? You know, when do they come in? Okay, so we've lost the neutrality effect here, which which down 25% on manpower, though it did help counter espionage, basically keeping other people from thinking we're dangerous enough to espionage us. Officer recruitment increases, air build, land build, all the build speeds increases, and we get plus 5% on supplies, plus 5% on espionage bonus, ruling party support. We're no longer an isolated country. And I do believe that does have a significant effect on all of the governments. Before 1936, sort of 35, 36, Italy is very much allied with Britain and France. And you may think that's sort of odd, being it's a fascist country and they were against fascism. Well, not so much. They weren't pro-fascism, but they were allied with an alliance structure with Italy. And Italy was also worried that it saw the various German rearmament elements, but also the Saarland being officially brought, because it had sort of been this sort of French administered zone when the Nazis took power. So the Saarland coming back into Germany, and then you start having things like the remilitarizing the Rhineland right in around 36, but also in 36 you have and seeing that France is doing nothing about it. So you see Italy developing the Three Powers Pact of Italy, Austria, and Hungary against. It's a defensive pact designed against a remilitarized Germany, but that is not in opposition or in counter or any sort of replacement to its alliance with Britain and France. It's more of a well, we're not sure if they're actually going to fight if something happens, and we sure don't want the Germans on our border. Obviously that changes, but so Italy is not an isolated country, even though it is a fascist country. It only starts to become isolated with pretty serious embargoes over the invasion of Ethiopia. And it continues by its behavior of taking out, basically unprovoked, Albania. So that does play a bit of a psychic situation on the Italians. Germans, of course, are very, very much isolated. They're the losers of World War I. Much of their neighbors have taken territory away from them because of World War I. Now, Germany didn't start it, but it was on the... Germany definitely is responsible for expanding World War I. First, that it goes to war, it joins Austria-Hungary, and it's sort of legitimately joining Austria-Hungary in a defensive pact versus the Russians. The Germans know that there's a alliance between Russia and France, so it feels it has to go to war with France. I'm not even sure if it has to do that. Now, of course, it could have done a defensive war, but that's not the Prussian mindset. Prussia's always been that small country that has big, powerful neighbors: Austria, Russia, France, Sweden to the north, that it needs to move rapidly and crush them individually. If it waits on the defensive, it's going to be crushed by all of it, because Russia is a big, powerful nation, but enough of its forces are far enough away. It takes a fair amount of time to mobilize them and a fair amount of time to get them to Prussia. So if it's defeated Austria before Russia can even show up to the war, now it's sort of instead of a war between Austria and Russia versus Prussia, now it's just a war, first a war versus Austria, then a war versus Russia. That's very much in the German mindset. You need to understand it to understand the German military mindset, in particular, not just World War I, but World War I, and it starts very much. So, but even with that, they then expand it by going into Belgium. Belgium hadn't done anything, made, in my opinion, or at least not my opinion, in my understanding, absolutely no bellicose intentions, had no intentions of supporting a French war effort over honoring an alliance with Russia, that Russia is interfering with trying to defend Serbia after Serbia supports the attack. And the Serbian Secret Service type elements definitely set up the attack on the Archduke Ferdinand, which is sort of like, oh yeah, we're just going to kill your vice president of America or something. Oh no, we didn't do that. It was your radicals. Well, yeah, but you gave them the guns to do it, didn't you? And the grenades. Yeah, but we weren't sure that who they were going to point them at. We all knew. I mean, it was a complete setup. It was an assassination attempt. They used other peoples, but it was definitely the Kingdom of Serbia that set that up. So that's it was akin to taking out the vice president of a country. So, and which is an act of war in and of itself. That is an act of war. Austria's attack on Serbia is not an overly aggressive. It is a reactive. Sure, it is an offensive as opposed to sitting on the defensive, but it is a reactive attack versus an attack of war. It's sort of like the U.S., well, Japan attacked us in Pearl Harbor. We're not just going to defend ourselves. We're going on the offensive. That's very much how I see Austria attacking Serbia. And Russia thinks it needs to get into this because it's sort of become the patron of Serbia. And Russia, of course, as you have the weak man of Europe, the Ottoman Empire, is weakening. Russia wants to make sure that any of the Balkan states or anywhere else is sort of collapsing, wants to push its influence in, because it really, really wants Constantinople. Oh, so bad. And I'm using the word Constantinople and not Istanbul for that particular reason. Wants that so bad. And I think would be willing to fight the Greeks and or the Bulgarians if somehow they were marching into Constantinople or Istanbul or something like that. But they want to sort of be there as part of those marching in to make sure that they end up with the territory. So that's sort of why they're supporting Serbia, as well as other reasons too. And so Germany is most assuredly, and I don't know how many are watching because we're doing Japan now, but I do have a large German audience here. Germany is definitely mostly assuredly solely responsible for invading. They wanted to do it peacefully. That was their whole plan, was to do it peacefully. But once the Belgians started to resist, they started to be very brutal because it was upsetting their plans. But it's Germany solely responsible for invading Belgium. And since Belgium basically had been a creation of Britain, and Britain had long been a, guarantor of Belgian independence, brings Britain into the war. Britain was, in my understanding, had no plans to enter in the German, the war until Belgium is attacked, and then Britain comes in. So that is all, and then the continued greater and greater misery that's as the war expands to Romania. Why are you going after Romania? Oh, because we can. And not that that's all just Germany, because there's also Austria, Hungary involved in it too. but the war gets expanded out, and it's sort of Germany doing it. And of course, Germany then gets Turkey into it much more than Austria, because Austria and Turkey are basically enemies. Not entirely, but they both are trying to get influence in this region here. So they're competitors at best, if not enemies. But Turkey sees what may be a good thing, in that Greece is, on the Allies' side, and Britain, maybe get some territory back or something from Britain. So, and maybe get some territory off Russia or whatever. So Germany talks Turkey into it. So Germany is expanding the war, causing more and more suffering. So yeah, Germany has a high responsibility. So they're isolated very much, and the Nazis don't do anything to help out that isolation in many ways. Now Japan, mostly because of its actions in China, has been isolating itself in the world. Remember who was supposed to have the 1940 Olympics? And I'm surprised that there really hasn't been more events revolved around that, because I guess they're all in Third Reich events. It was going to be Japan, the Tokyo Olympics, 1940. Well, because of the war in China, it's either in 38 or 39. I think it was late 38. I'd have to look that up. But the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, removes, or whatever you want to say, stops Japan from having the Olympics, and then they move it to Finland for the Summer Olympics, Helsinki. And since, even though how bad, and this is in 38 or 39, how bad Germany's been behaving with Czechoslovakia still, and the Sudetenland, it is moved to, Garmisch-Partenkirchen, or whatever, it's this god-awful long, here, yeah. Again, with Third Reich events, you get a nice little, those of you who haven't watched or used the mod, I think many of you, most probably have, get a nice little picture of the Olympic Village from one of the mountaintops there. But the reason they get it is because they have those facilities that were thought very adequate, or more than adequate, from the 36 Olympics. And so they were going to get the Winter Olympics again. How bad Germany was behaving, it was still much better than the Japanese situation, and they had the facilities ready to go at short notice. So they were going to get it, and it is only the outbreak of war in 39 that cancels the Olympics overall. So, yeah, so that's sort of the story. So these nations are feeling very isolated. I know we were talking about ruling party support. And so the peoples are like, what are our leaders doing? Well, by getting this tripartite pact, you can see lots of photos, particularly in Japan, but in the other nations, of the three flags hanging together, and people waving, the Italian and the German Nazi flags and that kind of thing, along with the Japanese. So like, we're all in this together. So now they feel that they're no longer isolated from the world. They are now found allies, and I'll use the term, there are inferiority complexes in Asia right now, still to this day, and were very much so back then. And it isn't some sort of and again, those of you who longtime viewers know, I am not a racist. I am a culturalist. It doesn't matter the race that they're Japanese. It matters that they're Japanese culture. It's not the race, it's the culture. And so, again, I live in Southern California, used to a truly multicultural societies, and grew up around people that, yeah, you could see that they were Oriental or Asian or however you want to say it, but they had basically my culture. And so I know that, and they were basically like me. But when I'm meeting, because I did take 3 years of Japanese in high school, when I'm meeting Japanese, not people of Japanese descent, but Japanese, they behave different. They walk different. I know I've gone on about some of this stuff. They move different. They have different rhythms of doing things than a Japanese person living in, grown up in America. And even though they may have Japanese parents, they are different. So it is a cultural thing. And so the Asian cultures, and I want to emphasize the Asian cultures, had for the longest time thought of themselves as the height of human culture in the world. And yes, they often, and I think still do, we could talk about that, and I have in the past, view it very much as a racial aspect as well. And they still view it as a racial aspect in many ways. It doesn't come into the sort of hate racism of like the Ku Klux Klan or the Nazis. That, generally speaking, I have not overly detected, but they still very much, including very much categorize large groups of people, and I think even individuals, in a racial context. Again, that's a cultural thing, not a racial thing, of various Asian groups. But the Chinese and the Japanese, in their own way, and they often conflicted, but see themselves as sort of the height of humanity, because they're, particularly, we know, like the Mongolians, they see as barbarians. Now, of course, the Mongolians take over China for a while, and even the Manchurians are sort of seen as sort of Chinese barbarians, or however, taking over the more cultured central China. That they see that, and they have had an inferiority complex once the Europeans showed up with not just bigger cannon or something, but what is really seen, and they're in some ways have surpassed, in some ways still catching up to Western technological levels. And, we can see most of our microchips are made, a lot of them are made in China there, because I know just very recently, because of embargoes against China, a lot of the manufacturing companies also have smaller plants in Taiwan, some other places, that they are expanding and opening up new ones outside of mainland China, Red China, to sell particularly to the U.S. so that they don't have higher tariffs coming in for microchips into the U.S. And so technologically, but still, they haven't been to the moon. And yeah, could they go to the moon? Yeah, but we can even look at all the failures, various spaceships with people on them in America blowing up, We've had a few space shuttles blow up. It's no assurity that if they were immediately to start putting together, and I know they put up satellites and things like that, but immediately start putting something to the moon, that they're going to do it successfully. So there's still and obviously we've moved technologically beyond it than what we were back when we were actively going to the moon. But they still feel this, and felt it very, very much. And we can see that it is still talked about in China, the unequal treaties. They very much have this inferiority complex compared to Europe. It's very much in this period. That's what I'm saying. Very, very much in this period. So Japan now having a couple of firm allies, one tied to the ancient Roman Empire as sort of reborn, and the other seen as a very technically advanced Germany, really will now give the people sort of like, our leaders are doing a good thing. And I really think I have a really strong appreciation of that. And of course, research efficiency. To the best of my knowledge, and again, I am not the best expert on this, I want to say that, to the best of my knowledge, pre and early war, there was very little actual technological transfers to Japan. Now, I could be entirely wrong on that, but prior to this, Japan has okay, I hope this is interesting to people. If not, if you want to jump ahead, if you've made it this far but are getting tired of this, you can jump past to where I close the tripartite pact window here. But Japan has a real difficulty in making a submachine gun. And I find that sort of strange. And they do end up making a submachine gun that I think, I don't know if I've ever actually sort of held one. I'm sure I haven't held one. Don't even know if I've seen one in person. But they have a real difficulty making a submachine gun. I don't entirely understand it. Maybe it's because The Japanese armaments guy is dead. Small arms is dead. Arisaka, I think, is dead by this time. So you look at some of the later Nambu pistols, suck. The Arisaka rifle, as we in the West, the collectors call them, are no wrong. The Type 99, they're no longer designed by Arisaka, but they're just developments on Arisaka. That I think he's Arisaka, but yeah, Arisaka, yeah. He's sort of the Japanese version of John Browning, though not nearly as talented, but does a very good job for a late 19th century rifle in the early Arisakas. That is a very good rifle. By the time you're getting around to 1939, it is a very dated rifle, meaning that the Arisaka types that are around would be, oh yeah, for World War I, yeah, this is a damn good rifle. For World War II, no, it ain't. And various things. Not that it's a bad rifle, but it's not even as updated as some of the older bolt action rifles. But and you got to remember, so much of World War I is fought. World War II. So much of World War II is fought with World War I technology. The 1911 pistol. Yes, they changed it a little bit to the 1911 A1, but again, that's a 1911 gun. The Springfield 1903 rifle is still in production through to the end of World War II, primarily being shipped off to places like China on the Burma Road and even late use. So they still keep that factory open to ship them off to China, just because trying to shut that down would, and retooling it would slow down production. So the U.S. continues to produce and uses through to the end of the war 1903s at home and overseas as sort of like, oh yeah, you're the such and such supply company. You drive trucks, don't you? Well, your security guards for your base, that are guarding the big supply dumps, they're probably in a lot of places like in England still equipped with 1903s. Definitely at home, the National Guard and other units, many of those units are mobilized 100% and are sent overseas as proper divisions, but they're still having a lot of troops in the U.S. and, like I know for a fact, in both East and West Coast, but has a lot more importance on the West Coast, the coastal artillery, that have major big guns up and along just on the ports. But on these ports there are still, and they operate until 46, 47, keeping them manned, and they're manned throughout the war at full combat readiness. In fact, I think it was either in Washington or Oregon, some Japanese subs were coming in, and the battery commander orders the batteries not to fire because these subs, however much damage they were going to do, wasn't going to be very much, and they didn't want to expose the location and or the limitations. They were older guns that would blow to hell a cruiser if the cruiser got in range, but modern cruisers would have greater range on artillery, and the U.S. is upgrading the forts before and early parts of the war, putting in a bunch of the, I hope you guys are interested in all this, putting in a bunch of the naval guns that were for the that were scrapped for, what was it, the 1924 Washington Naval Treaty, that really cut back on it. The U.S. was building some ships that they got scrapped, but was building guns, some that were ready, some that weren't ready for it, and all the gun barrels were kept. And slowly over time, starting around 32, 34, to be turned over to the Army. The coastal artillery was an Army unit formation, whatever, specifically, stationary stuff. But the guns were transferring over because the U.S. was planning bigger, better guns for its newer ships that were going to be built. So these guns weren't going to be used for that. So they were slowly transferring them as needed, as they're actually building them and placing them, more modern, longer ranged artillery. I have an event in Third Reich events that I went through and looked up and put in all of the gun emplacements as of sort of that were completed by 1936, sometime in 36, says for an at-start free coastal artillery, coastal defense stuff that, well. these type of coastal forts, as well as some other stuff that I found severely lacking here and there that you normally don't see. It just happens for the U.S. unless you happen to be playing the U.S. with Third Reich events installed. You don't see that. And so all of those troops would also have, even though their job is to load and shoot these big guns, would all have Springfield type rifles, and all of the, shall we say, security apparatus troops. You know, guys that would provide small arms support and whatnot, would be armed throughout World War II with Springfields of one flavor or another, whether they're the older Springfields that are unupgraded or upgraded. They sort of move the sight positions. And as a frontline combat weapon up and through to the end of the war, the Springfield is still used as a sniper rifle, scope sniper rifle. They were, towards the end of the war, putting in the M1 Model D with a scope as a sniper rifle as well. But the Springfield still serves in the U.S. Army as a sniper weapon through to the end of the war. And then you have the 1917 machine gun by John Browning. That is sort of the heavy 30 caliber machine gun used until the end of the war. Note the date, 1917. The 1919 machine gun is the standard machine gun up until the M60 is brought into American service. So that's well through the Korean War, and they still were using 1917. The 1917 has a water jacket, and it's different internally than the 1919, but they look sort of similar other than the water jacket. It's still very much used in Korea. So we're using the 1919. We're using the 1918, again, note the date, Browning automatic rifle as the sort of squad automatic through to the end of the war. We're using the 50 caliber heavy barrel. Oh, we're still using that gun. That was a World War I designed gun. There are improvements, including the main thing, and I don't know how much of the U.S. troops have actually been converted over to a quick change barrel on it, but the company does offer quick change barrel options. So that shows how much. It's mainly the M1 carbine and the M1 Garand are in small arms that are not World War I base weaponry for the U.S. Army. Britain, it's almost entirely World War I technology. Sure, they've got a bit more sensible, bit more streamlined production Enfield rifle, but it's old in foundation, and they were even trying to make it go past the war too. They were doing the jungle carbine version of it. But then you got the Vickers machine gun is very much the main thing that's popping into my head that is very much a World War II thing is the Czech machine gun called the Bren gun in English service, Bruno Enfield. So and we can go on and on and on about that, how much of World War I equipment is still used in World War II as primary frontline fighting equipment. Well, Japan has trouble, to get back to the submachine guns, trouble producing them. So they buy a bunch of machine guns from Austria, maybe even from Germany as well, but they're the Austrian-made Soltrum, by getting this right, it's the MP34 or it's the MP36. I think it's the MP34. They buy a bunch of those from Austria because Japan is having trouble developing a submachine gun. They buy a bunch. They're really nice. They're some of the best submachine guns made before or during World War II. There's more. The Uzi and other more modern submachine guns are better than them, but they're some of the best wartime, but they're expensive to make, very expensive to make for a submachine gun. And so Japan is having trouble with a lot of this stuff. And so I see very little technological changes. When Japan does eventually, I think it's the Type 100, though I could be wrong, their submachine gun, they eventually get something into production. It works okay, but it's just something that's so simple to do that they just take a while and just don't do well on, even when they do it. So I don't see a lot of weapons technology transfers pre and early war to Japan. Now there very well could be technical transfers electronic research for things like radar or something may be transferred, maybe chemical transfers to do better synthetic fuels and other things like that that may be going on that I just don't know about because I don't study that. Because as you can tell, I know the story of the weapons of World War II for at least all of the major powers. Doesn't mean I got every single detail in my head. I can't tell you, every little thing. But I know the basic stories of all, and I could go on through most of the major powers, all their small arms. I don't know if I want to call myself an expert on that, but I know it better than most people, even that know firearms. But I also know to a lesser extent we see very little tank technology transfer. We do see Japan buying often one-offs or one or twos, aircraft of various types, often from America, in the 30s. Some very much not designed around military functions, but, can function as that. And they normally take them apart and look at them and then build something that only vaguely looks like it, meaning they don't copy it. They sort of like, oh, this is how it works. Oh, this is what they're doing. Oh, okay. Well, we'll take this information and then go design our own thing. So instead of, so they wouldn't be, I don't even think they're even thinking in the terms of they don't want to do licensed production like in this or be internationally charged with, stealing copyrighted materials. But they're just sort of like, well, how does this work? What's the kind of thing? Okay. And then just sort of figure out how they generally work and then design their own stuff, often coming out very much in a direct, we buy this thing, design time later, 6 months, whatever it is, they're starting production on something that's very similar in function. Why they don't make direct copies, I don't know. And that even goes to when they're getting the plans for the jets late in the war from Germany. So in a late war, there's lots of technological transfers to Japan from Germany. Lots. They never directly copy the German designs. They take the basic principles, they take some of the jet engine principles, which they had been having some difficulty with. They understood the concepts, but some of the more detailed of how you're forcing the air down and lighting it on fire and shooting it out the back, and the ratios or whatever. I'm not, as you can tell, not very good at all that. They take that information and that stuff, but still sort of using a lot of stuff, design their own things. I don't know why they don't just go, oh, we've got good plans here, let's build this. I'm not entirely sure. But I know that I recently was I was recently reading actually a thing about the U.S. producing the I think it was the Oerlikon gun. It was either the Oerlikon gun, the 20 millimeter, or it was the Bofors. Whether it was the Swedish Bofors, no, I think it was the Swedish Bofors, and not the Swiss Oerlikon. But they get the plans for the Bofors guns. That's it. They get the plans for the Bofors guns sent over to them, to America, because they license the building of them. And they look at the plans, and not only are they in European metric, but the plans are in a different prospective, the way they're drawn on the thing than the U.S. production setup is used to looking at, from a different angle or something like that. And again, I'm not an expert on it, but the plan, for all the parts, and dimensions, they're not to the normal, what the U.S. do as a normal perspective. And they look at the measurements even after converting them, and they realize that if they were to put the gun together as made to the plans, it won't work, because the Bofors plant is sort of a handcraft factory, in that they get the part and then they start to put it together and see, it doesn't work, and then go do a little more grinding on it, and then fitting. They do hand fitting. See, you're still in the British Army, they still call the repair and recovery people in the British Army fitters. We don't have that term in American mechanical anything. We don't have fitters because we don't have to fit the parts together. They just always go together. Or if they don't fit, it's wrong. Where in Britain at the time, and also in Sweden, the parts don't come out of the factory working. They come out almost, and then you've got to, the tolerances aren't right or correct. And so you've got to do minor adjustments on the pieces to get them to fit together right in many areas of production. And that's how and you can look at it, that's very much how the Swedish factory works. America, because it's Chrysler, I think it is, that takes over production. No, I think they were doing Oerlikon guns, Chrysler. One of the major factories takes over production of the Bofors guns. And so they look at these tolerances and whatnot and realize that if you just get all the parts, you set the parts on the floor and then assemble them, the gun won't work. The gun won't even go together without mechanical fitting. So they have to redesign the plans for the Bofors guns. And so that if you were to look at it, all the designs, they look the same, but you can't take a Swedish part and drop it into the American system. One, the measurements between metric and the American inch system is part of it too, but just the tolerance quality is just not there. America is one of the best tolerance quality, if not the best tolerance quality mass producing in the world. I say one of the best because maybe Germany could top it on a standard mass production line. I don't know. But America, that is over the British production, has very high tolerances. One of the reasons why Americans used to have such, and it's gotten better again, is the 70s, things went to hell, but high reliability of things like arms or automobiles because their tolerances in their production was very high. So and so it could be that the German plans show up in Japan and they can sort of get them, but they may be again to this different perspective than the developers are used to, and it may be that they're to the different measurements, and could be a bunch of things like that. So they go, instead of trying to just work the plans out, use these as a guide to develop your own version of jet fighters or something, because they look very, very similar. And if you look at them, and the Americans get a hold of a bunch at the end of the war, sort of surprised at how nice they are actually, that they're very good, but they're very similar to the German models that they're copied from, but they're not the same. And so that may all be part of some of these reasons why things worked or didn't work. Beyond that. But so definitely by late war, we're getting lots of research efficiency benefits that should be there. Giving them money, rare materials, okay. That very much happens for Germany and Japan. They chose to postpone. Okay, they're going to postpone. And yes, we'll do that too. Now, Italy, on the research front, mostly refuses German help. And it mostly comes from their manufacturers that they want to build their own tank designs, build their own artillery designs. They don't want to copy German aircraft designs. Although I believe it's mostly all assembly, but there's hundreds, don't know the exact numbers, but hundreds of Stuka dive bombers are made in Italy. But I think that they're don't know for sure, but wow, there's fighting off Malta, fighting off here. Had been fighting off there. Looks like they're leaving, whether victorious or just didn't engage. The Stukas that were produced in Italy, I think they're just assembled there, meaning all the parts are sent down there, and so using Italian man hours labor to put them together instead of using German ones, man hours. And so Italy, I know, does fly a bunch of Stuka bombers, sort of mid-war for Italy, but those are I think all the engines and all the parts are run off of a German production line and sent to Italy for assembling for the Italian Air Force. But they don't properly set up, because the Italians realize, and they get sent to them a bunch of Panzer IVs and Stugs and whatnot sent down to them. But the Italian manufacturer just convinced Italy that no, we're going to design our own, El Duce. We'll do our own, and El Duce goes along with it for some stupid reason. Instead of early on saying, no, you just start on converting your production line to the German models. They talk him out of it. Remember, totalitarianism in Italy is an aspiration. It is never a fact. Yeah, Mussolini, again, he coins the term fascism and starts the fascist movement. He also coins the term totalitarianism as a good thing, and that's what he wants his government to be. It never is. Up until the end, it never becomes a totalitarian state. He would like it to be. It never is. Where Germany wants the party is supreme, most assuredly, and the race is sort of supreme. But Hitler does never want a totalitarian state. That may seem odd to you, but Hitler likes competition. Hitler likes organizations and individuals competing with each other, fighting. But I use fighting in a very loose sense. And that now he doesn't want SA stormtroopers shooting at SS, I don't know if you want to call them SS soldiers. No, he doesn't want that kind of fighting. But he wants the competition. But he also wants the competition in the economic life. Now, he doesn't want price gouging that, we can get away with doubling our profits and selling, some widget to the people, that toasters to the people, if we can sell it for. No, he wants the manufacturers to make a fairish profit, or whatever that comes down to. And so there are a lot of controls on the economy. But this is why I describe it much more as a mercantilist economy than a fascist economy in Germany. And so that there's controls, but he wants the auto manufacturers to compete with each other. He wants the chemical factories to compete with each other. He wants the competition. He doesn't want the fascist state so much, or a totalitarian state so much in all of that. And I really do believe that. But by 1944, it's a totalitarian state only because of the necessity of the war. And that only happens because Speer is put in charge of it. And so this isn't his inclination. This isn't Hitler. Hitler wants to be the master of, him totally in charge and no one else at the top. And, he doesn't want a competitive leadership system in that sense. And he wants the competitiveness in politics to be within the party, which all owe loyalty to him and to his racial ideas. He's not looking for even the old nationalist party, the DP, the National German Party, or however it would be translated into the English, the Deutsches Party. He doesn't want them competing with the National Socialists. He doesn't want that outside competition, but he wants a competition going on in National Socialist Germany. And until, when he goes to war with France, he's very worried about civilian reaction, so he allows a lot of the civilian economy to continue and only slowly puts on various rationing schemes and limiting the amount of resources that the military can use going to civilian production, toasters or whatever, the metal for toasters, that kind of thing. I'm just using that as a colloquial general piece of product, but he's allowing that going on. And then once the war with France is over, and there's seen as no great reason to continue to restrict the civilian economy because the war is almost over. They've defeated France and Britain. They're still just sort of the submarine warfare and all those guys out in the desert shooting at each other and a little bit of bombing, but things are mostly okay. So the civilian economy, it is only after 41 and the failure to conquer the Soviet Union do they start to really put on a full wartime economy and start moving it into a totalitarian type system. And it's all done in steps and stages and resisted at many different levels as Speer is taking over the economy. So Nazi Germany, like the Soviet Union, becomes a totalitarian system. But that is not what Hitler wants, and it is not in the ideology of economic ideology of National Socialism as Hitler puts it forward. Please note what I said there, as Hitler puts it forward. Goebbels and some of the leftists, now you got like the Stennis Revolt and some of the other real leftist people and some of the brothers. Georgi and Otto, their last name. See, I know who they are, but I'm blanking on their last name. One is killed by Hitler, the other one escapes and sees out the rest of the war in Canada. Early Nazi supporters. They're a bit more left-wing. And so there is definitely left-wing elements within National Socialism that wants stronger controls over the economy. But the right-wing within National Socialism wants less controls over the economy in Germany. So National Socialist thought is a bit confused. You know, so meaning you can point to something at somewhere that contradicts what I'm saying. But what I'm trying to say is this is what Hitler envisions, maybe not what Goebbels envisions. You know, it's a contradictory system, and that's again how Hitler wants it, because he wants the left and the right within the Nazi Party to battle it out to see who's right. Because Hitler, in many ways, on many of these things, is not an ideologue. He's an ideologue on race. Most assuredly an ideologue on race. But he is not an ideologue. He's much more pragmatic on many other issues. Now, he has natural inclinations. Most assuredly. But he is willing to be proved wrong. And if you think that I'm somehow praising him, I'm not. I'm just analyzing him as I see Hitler. Okay, battle commander recognition, which we're going to do, and our province lost. Okay, and for some reason they decided to attack my railway train. They can support the attack. Put some anti-aircraft guns into it. Headquarters personnel out there. Get them out in the field. Have them shoot their little pistols at the enemy. And so that's, you know. And so again, like, totalitarianism is aspirational for fascism. It becomes a fact for Germany, which I find that very interesting. And partly what I'm doing with all of this is I see both people that either do or should know better, spewing off terms like fascist in real life, and then other people that just, you know, fascism is the insult, like, you're a racist. What? Because we don't like Colin Kaepernick disrespecting the flag? Oh, well, he's just doing it because cops have killed black people. Yeah, cops have killed black people in bad, wrong circumstances. And some of them have gone to jail as, you know, for murder. And he's not all wrong on the idea of cops need to have responsibility for their actions. And in some individual cases, he's right, because the cops have gone to jail. In some cases, they haven't gone to jail, but the cops acted badly and they've been fired or whatever. But his disrespecting the flag, how is that? Oh, America's racist, and if you don't agree with that. So it's just a slur that's put out there. And so a lot of times people will put out fascist as a slur. You know, if you have a bunch of fascists running around the street calling everybody else fascist, they have fascist in their name. Now it's anti-fascist, Antifa, but they behave. Saw this great little meme that has parallels of SS or SA stormtroopers and Antifa, and how they both hate Jews. Interesting. And they both beat people up. And just because Antifa is very, very anti-Jewish, anti-Semitic. and how they're behaving just like the fascists and the Nazis, and they just get to do it because they claim to be anti that. And yeah. So yeah, a lot of people push this around, but then there's also other people that are should or do know better that call countries fascist when they're not. And again, that doesn't mean when I'm saying some country is not fascist, doesn't mean I'm saying it's all right. It's not fascist. It may be worse than fascist, which I think Nazism is and communism both are orders of magnitude worse than the fascists ever were or ever planned to be. They're much worse, and people will wear their t-shirts with Che Guevara or Mao on them. And they're much worse than any Mussolini ever wanted to be or was. And if you wear, and again, I wouldn't wear, because as you can tell, I don't like fascism. I wouldn't wear a shirt with Mussolini on the picture. But to me, wearing a shirt with Mussolini is much more acceptable than wearing a shirt with Mao on it. But then, you know, we live in a crazy world. Okay, on that note, that we live in a crazy world, we're going to end this episode. Thank you for watching. Thank you for liking the videos. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Love to see you around more often. And, of course, please post questions, comments, suggestions, corrections. Love hearing from you. See you next time for more Hearts of Iron.